My name is Zach Richter, and I am giving the lecture for the West Coast Loon today on disability argumentation and physician-assisted suicide. And first, I'm going to start you off with the key understanding that I'm presenting multiple different areas of disability activism and theory, but for those areas to make sense, we have to start off with the base theory which disability rests on, which is kind of what is disability. So before I'm getting to the area which is relevant to 2014's debate topic, I am focusing on the social model of disability and the debates around it, and then the movement and how and how that movement relates to that social model of disability. Because I'm talking to who I know are professional debaters, amazing debaters at Rashad Evans Camp. I'm not going to do all the research for you. This is mainly a broad overview of the different different ways that a disability debate can go. So to start off, I want to give you some tools for some good Boolean searches regarding the area of disability studies. And I'm going to list off some words, and those are interdependence, universal design, ableism, normalcy, narrative prosthesis, samenism, impairment, physician-assisted suicide, stigma, isolation, disability culture, social model of disability, CRIP, disability justice, accessibility, inaccessibility, assistance, care, technology, access need, access intimacy, neurodiversity, person first, identity first, prosthetic, health, disability, mental disability, intellectual disability, speech impairment, psychiatric or consumer, PSX, deaf studies. And now I've given you some key words. I'm going to give you some key areas in disability studies. Now, one key area is queer disability studies. There's post-colonial disability studies. There's feminist disability studies. There's black disability studies, and there's Marxian disability studies, and there's disability studies in education, and there's literary disability studies, and all of the above terms are great for Boolean searches, and but like I said, we have to get back to the social model. So the social model of disability is a very key structure which kind of manages the unique point of view on disability maintained by disability activists and people involved in disability politics. And the initial goal of it was to distinguish for disability activists between how doctors relate to and define a disability, and how disability activists themselves understand a disability. So one of the first basic ideas that the social model of disability encourages is that there is kind of a world of the social and kind of two worlds of explanation, and there's the world of the biopathological, which would understand everything as kind of individual systems going awry by themselves, and would see the best thing to better disabled people's lives being that is a medical procedure. And the other model, I would say, is the social model, which sees the disabled person perhaps as having some impairment-based difficulties, but not having those difficulties occupy a central place. And so the social model of disability kind of puts access first. And some great theorists to read for this would be Mike Oliver and Barnes, and it is worth checking out a lot of the work of my British professor. His name is the work of my professor. His name is Jim Charlton, and it is important that the social model is an idea which emerged not from academia, but directly from the activism of disabled people themselves. The first organization that did anything with it was an organization that was not at all very professionalized, and they were located in the UK, and they were called UPIAS. And so I'm going to quote them, and their quotation is, our own position on disability is quite clear and is fully in line with agreed principles. In our view, it is society which is stable to physically impaired people. Disability is something imposed on top of our impairments. By the way, we are unnecessarily isolated and excluded from full participation in society. Disabled people are therefore an oppressed group in society. It follows from this analysis that having low incomes, for example, is only one aspect of our oppression. It is a consequence of our isolation and integration in every area of life, such as education and work, mobility and housing, and etc. And so that's the first social model of disability, which separates impairment and socially created disability, and it sees socially created disability, or kind of disability oppression, as responsible as a thing which is responsible for all of the low quality of life for disabled people, and as for the reason why disabled people are often locked up in nursing homes, and that will get I'll get to that more in the next section when I'm talking about the disability rights movement. But for now, I'm going to go to the feminist backlash against that initial social model. Now, the feminist backlash happened in the early 1990s, and it was also accompanied by a kind of post-structuralist backlash as well. And I think that both parts of this backlash kind of criticize the social model for its focus on material conditions as all coming from this shadowy bogeyman of disability oppression, and for constructing impairment as a part of the disabled experience, which is kind of less prominent. And so it is a feminist ethic to view the personal as political. And so feminists like Liz Crow thought of impairment as not entirely neutral and irreducible, and as a casualty of the social model critique of the medical model. And so I'm going to quote Liz Crow right now, and she says that many of us remain frustrated and disheartened by pain, fatigue, depression, and chronic illness, including the way they prevent us from realizing our potential or railing against disability, our experience of exclusion and discrimination. Many of us fear for our futures with progressive and additional impairment. We mourn past activities that are no longer possible for us. We are afraid we may die earlier, or that suicide may seem our only option. We desperately seek some effective medical intervention. We feel ambivalent about the possibilities of our children having impairments, and we are motivated to work for the prevention of impairment. Yet our silence about impairment has made many of these things taboo and create a whole new series of constraints on our self-expression. Now, Liz Crow and Jenny Morris and a bunch of feminists in the 1990s took up this important critique of the social model and aimed to place the personal experience of impairment as in a bigger place. And so this kind of feminist disability argument is also accompanied by the famous ethicist Eve Kitay, who theorized the feminist ethics of care. And so in these theorizations, the kind of scope through which we are viewing this thing which is a disability is zeroed in on the person, on the personal, and what can we learn from a person who might need help sometimes, or might have difficulty, or might do things a little bit differently. And so instead of posing a political critique that kind of asked for a huge change in how society views in a wider society, a kind of macroscopic view. The materialist feminists in the 1990s kind of focused on kind of called for a personalism, and that'll be relevant as we consider the various incarnations of the disability politic. But also, people like Tom Shakespeare criticized the social model for creating this very strict kind of structural form, which excluded the complexity of experience being, maybe more difficult and more confusing than just a matter of always being exclusion. So there were also some post-structuralist critiques of the social model. Now, following these critiques of the social model, in the early 2000s, people realized that the social model was still a valuable thing. Almost as quickly as post-structuralism and post-structuralist explanations became popular in the academy, people were already railing against them. And and this is kind of reclamation of the social model in the early 2000s and going up to 2008. Kind of attempts to use the skill at balancing and redefining meanings and kind of playing with understandings that post-structuralists held so highly to better negotiate the basic problem and goal of the social model. And I spotlight two major theorists who contribute to this social model debate. And that would be Tobin Siebers and Fiona Kumari Campbell. And Tobin Siebers has a post-structuralist negotiation of the medical and social model, and sees them as both contingent on social circumstance, but also sees the two kind of playing along together in the kind of psyche-based experience of the disabled person. What's very crucial for both of them is imagining a person trying to get care for their impairment, but also trying to maintain equality with a caregiver. So it's kind of a dual responsibility, a dual commitment situation, and complex embodiment and the post-structuralist kind of neo-materialist theories of the social model allow for that. And in my opinion, as a scholar, that is kind of a better way of negotiating these forces than either saying kind of access first, as the original kind of social model Marxist-inspired people said, or saying impairment first and the personal first, as the kind of feminist critics of them said in the 90s. So it's better to kind of balance that. And right now I'm going to quote Tobin Siebers, and he is describing the writings on disability culture from an important activist named Cheryl Marie Wade, who wrote the Disability Culture Rap, and I hope you will check out her work as well. But what Siebers says is, Wade experiences a corporate reality rarely imagined by the ill-bodied. Her account of a complex embodiment ruptures the dominant model of pain found in body theory today, projects and projects a highly individual dimension of feeling, and yet speaks in the political first person plural. She describes the reality, both physical and political, of those people with disabilities who need care and risk to pay for it with their independence and personal self-esteem as they struggle to maintain some portion of equality and of equality with their caregivers. So there's this sense in which the experience for disabled people is that kind of equity and access to care trade-off, and Tobin Siebers kind of highlights that choosing either side of that trade-off is kind of a bad deal for the disabled person. So it's better to understand that impairment can be a negative thing on a personal level, but that as far as having one's group gain a greater degree of equity, it is important to understand it as publicly neutral. And Fiona Kumar Campbell also thinks about internalized ableism and a compulsory able-bodiedness, which is an idea taken from McGruer, and she thinks of it, in terms of a cultural ideology which kind of frames how we think about our own bodies. So in this case, it is kind of the disability that is pointed to in the social model, which causes impairment to be kind of ignored in the first place. And Campbell realizes that we try to avoid feeling vulnerable because a society which is ableist structures everything, and structures social presence in order to exclude those moments of impairment and vulnerability. And so these kind of more multifaceted negotiations of the social model are very crucial as an answer for those people arguing for disability in a way which is not strictly through a structuralist, a materialist viewpoint, or through a strictly personalist, impairment-focused approach. It is important that for teams for debate teams that are seeing this, that if you're encountering a team that's talking about disability and ableism or accommodation and access, it would be good to ask for their stance on the social model, because there's a great amount of ground here for a variety of different arguments, and you can pretty much tell which way this is going based on the focus of their evidence. It seems to be a reasonable thing to me as a former a disability debater to expect teams that are focusing on disability as a political issue to somehow have some way of negotiating both impairment and disability at the same time, and to negotiate this social model debate. So I think that this is a very important concern in disability studies, and this remains one of the most hotly contested kind of underlying bases for a disability politics, which is this question of balancing the public and the personal, and the social and the medical, and balancing these kind of opposing forces, in order to get a better idea of that, we'll move to a second very central concern in disability politics, and that is, how does one challenge ableism and disability? And these three approaches are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but they can be argued as such. And to any to the delight of many, many people involved in the disability rights movement have also been involved in disability culture, and many involved in disability culture have also been involved in disability studies in higher education. And so all of these things have been co-contaminating one another for quite some time. So the first kind of way that people have challenged ableism and disability has been through the disability rights movement, or the DRM, as I'm referring to it in my notes. And the DRM has put a strong emphasis on material conditions that affected disabled people. How are we living? How is transport accessible to us? Is it easy for us to live on our own? Is it easy for us to get jobs? And the sad situation is that for disabled people as a whole, the answer to those questions has been very, very, very negative. So the great goal of my friends in the original disability rights movement has been to create a set of institutions that could provide access and could focus on lobbying within the government, and trying to get more support and more institutional structure that would allow disabled people say what's accessible and to respond when an organization or a company is inaccessible, and to receive services. And another part of the work that has been done by this original disability rights movement, which was kind of inflected with a Marxist materialism, has been to focus on policy reforms in government and on a concept of rights, which is fairly debatable. And it is notable that this part of the movement has dominated the spotlight for quite some time. And there's good reasons for that, and there's bad reasons for that. They have done a lot of great work as far as liberating people who were formerly confined to nursing homes due to having various impairments, but they were also involved, in this kind of process that went on of kind of privatizing care. And so the ADA is problematic when we see it as kind of this kind of neoliberal move toward deregulating government and reducing the commons, and kind of building all these exterior institutions that could be manipulated by both the government and corporations to give services. So some of the organizations that respond by the formal disability rights movement are known as the Centers for Independent Living and the National Center for Independent Living, and the National Center for Disability. And these organizations more or less were started with an intention of providing access, but it could be argued that they've more or less been co-opted by the social service sector. And it is important to note that the disability rights movement, is very white male and heterosexual and bourgeoisie dominated. And for my debate friends out there, there's a lot of great policy and middle of the road apps that could be made with kind of the disability rights movement rhetoric. For the people who are kind of arguing against a disabled person or a disability studies argument, it would be good to have them specify to what level they're affirming the disability rights movement. What their commitment is to that, how they relate to it. If you're facing a disability team, asking them about that sounds like a good a good place to produce clash, because a lot of the original a lot of theories of access center on a concept of rights, and we in political theory we critique this concept of rights very reasonably, because it is kind of this unreliable standard that we're expecting government to support, and the disability rights movement has been very much about trying to address problems in disabled people's lives, through major institutions, through the state, and sometimes it might seem a little bit like it rebrands some social services that used to be considered therapies under kind of an access rhetoric. And so it's very important to think about how the disability rights movement started off as completely radical and completely asking for a lot of things that were baffling people, and then kind of various industries, various profitable forces found ways of nestling within it and turning it into something which is useful for them, and some of the various and a lot of the Centers for Independent Living, which used to be so cutting edge, kind of hired more social services people, and it's kind of more condescending within those places, because unlike other kind of areas of disability activism, Centers for Independent Living were focused on services. the focus of the disability rights movement is on quality of life, because in the past it has been so low. So there are multiple critiques to be made of that, and it's important to be aware of those. And it's also important to be aware of those debate arguments which might, on the one hand, affirm a disability rights, but then use kind of a disability critique later on in the debate. And it would be important for a debater hearing this to think about how to set some of the more critical elements in a disability argument against kind of these more rights-based assumptions. But I want to move on to the next kind of way that ableism and disability have been challenged, and the next model is the culture and the community model. And this model was pioneered by people like Mia Mingus, organizations like Sins Invalid, and scholars like Petra Kuppers, and the disability culture model, also pioneered by Cheryl Marie Wade, focused on community and performance and art as a way of questioning negative perceptions about disability. And because the disability culture model was run by a lot of disabled people, many of whom were kind of disenfranchised by the original disability rights movement, it elevates sexuality, because there is a traditional experience for disabled people of feeling desexualized, because within an able-bodied sexual world, to be marked as impaired is to be permanently stigmatized. So the disability culture that is most active within the United States is very much led by queer disabled people and queer people of color and women of color and a whole lot of other disenfranchised groups whose message and whose goals extended beyond services, and who wanted empowerment. Empowerment for their bodies, empowerment to feel their bodies fully, empowerment, to know themselves. And I think this tradition in thinking provides a lot of great basis for debate and for all kinds of different argumentation. And I think that the performance of a disability art project in a debate round would be fabulous. And to provide some areas, some thinking about how a disability culture and community-based area of thought would clash with the disability rights movement would be to, I would urge you to read Chris Bell's critique of white disability studies, which I have posted in the resistance group. I would urge you to read critiques of disability politics from the area known as Black disability studies and feminist feminist disability studies and queer disability studies. I think these models would also critique the disability rights movement for not aiming far enough, for just trying to nestle within the set of dominant dominant institutions, and not trying to change people's worldview. And I think that what makes Sins Invalid and many other forms of disability culture very, very powerful is because that it takes on the problems of ableism on an ideological level. And I think that the disability rights movement kind of sometimes it doesn't really do that. It doesn't really critique ableist imagery, and it cedes some space to a kind of supplemental or reformist model it doesn't allow it kind of negates authentic disabled people's expression, and it forgets about the issue of representation, and it forgets about the complexity of trying to be empowered. And I think there's a substantial argument to be made that that culture is what undergirds most law, and that the disability culture movement, or the disability culture part of disability activism does more to change the world, in that it challenges cultural perceptions. And there's many scholars who write about this, and this is a very strong area in thinking about disability issues. So the third model the third way of approaching ableism and disability oppression is through a pedagogical and academic model. So for this, I would say think about free air, think about critical pedagogy, think about people who want to use the classroom to make a change. For this part of the conversation, I want to highlight that some of the most major academic backing for disability studies has been in two areas. One is literature, which has allowed kind of more high theory, and the other area is in education. And education has stressed making classrooms more accessible. Ways of teaching, ways of pedagogy, which do not segregate disabled people off into other rooms, as special ed has the tendency to do, or try to normalize disabled people, as special ed has the tendency to do, but to try and create a classroom which is inclusive of all voices. This kind of relates to a higher education regime of disability studies, which is based and funded by education and health institutions, but it does speak to trying to vary a message and make it more complex, and speaks to disability activism as kind of an academic argument, and disability as an area of study, and kind of this pedagogical goal of teaching against ableism. And there's a lot of excellent scholarship in terms of educating for access and using autobiographical details from a disabled person's life to speak about ableism and to counter negative attitudes. And that is also a strong approach to challenging ableism and disability. I would say that you see some clashes, but between the academic model and the rights model when mainstream activists are calling for certain legislative reforms, but kind of scholars want to go in more post-structuralist directions, which are less material, and the scholarship is definitely rooted in this kind of rights activism world, but it tends to go on lengthy diversions. So there is often room for critique from both sides, both to critique the scholars from getting too ungrounded and kind of escaping into a theoretical bubble, and to critique the rights movement and the activist movement for kind of sending the wrong messages about a disability, and not taking time to argue it properly and to educate. It's important to realize that a bunch of disability activism translated in academia, because former activists because academia is, of course, a place where different perspectives are more or less encouraged, and there's this effort to make teaching meet all these different needs, and And so we get in academia all this possibility as far as trying to have conversations about these things and speak to someone about disability issues in a way which convinces them, instead of doing a performative approach. And I realized that I didn't list as many sources as I wanted to list. So I think J.E. Bickenbach is great for the disability rights model, and Chris Bell and Robert McRuer and Terry Ellis and all of those voices are great for the cultural model. And as far as education, I would say go with the work of Nirmala Arabelis, and those are the three different ways of approaching a disability. And now I'm going to move on to the part of my lecture which is focusing on the issue in this year's topic of physician-assisted suicide. Now these are some arguments for and against physician-assisted suicide within the wider disability studies canon, and I would start by giving you the citations of Gill and Broswell. Gill is kind of an physician-assisted suicide scholar, and Broswell might be more allowing of it. And I would say that the arguments 2 and 4, for and against rather, physician-assisted suicide come down to two major sides, and those would be kind of access first, or agency and autonomy first. And access first draws on a canon of physically disabled and health disabled voices, and implies asking for government services at a better quality of life, and focuses on kind of a very disability rights movement based agenda, and draws attention to health and access disparities, and thinks about the disability community as a whole, which may draw questions from people who will point out how it is dominated by white disabled people, for instance. The Access First crowd makes a lot of allusions to history, especially specifically the killing off of disabled people during the Holocaust and that kind of genocide. And a very important organization on the Access First side is Not Dead Yet, with this important slogan in criticism of physician-assisted suicide, which is better dead than disabled. And then the core assumption within the Access First crowd is that disabled people are coerced into physician-assisted suicide by doctors and family members and ableist society in general. And their argument will go on to say that disability depression sets the terms for what a disabled person can do in society, and that's an important argument. But on the other side, we get a kind of canon of anti-psychiatry and feminist kind of thinkers who prioritize personal independence and personal choice, and these voices prioritize patient autonomy over broad-based access to services, and call for personal agency and autonomy, and these voices are wary of trying to decide things for a huge group of people, and but these voices are also accompanied by some anti-psychiatry folks like Zaz, Thomas Zaz, who critiques the kind of tack of taking options off the table for disabled people, so there are a couple of debates at issue in terms of physician-assisted suicide, and they do both draw an important strain in disability argumentation, and some debate is over determinism. Hardcore access activists draw attention to coercion, People focused on choice, patient autonomy, focused on independent choice. Both sides may resort to a rights framework. There are those who have argued that there should be a right to take one's own life. I think one issue for disability studies involved in this conversation is the issue of the hierarchy of disability, which is this kind of hierarchy of which a disabled group gets its needs addressed first. And within that hierarchy, physical disabilities are viewed as given the first kind of attention because they are most obvious, and kind of invisible and health disabilities are kind of lower on that hierarchy. But it is important to realize that in the debate community, that hierarchy of disability might be flipped because there are less obviously physically disabled people who are in debate, and so there's kind of a higher bias in our community toward various forms of mental disability. So I'm expecting kind of more. While the disability studies world is very, very polarized on this, the physically disabled crowd kind of has it more or less. I'm not expecting that kind of a scenario in the debate world. I'm expecting a lot of people to use kind of impairment first arguments to back kind of arguments asking to decriminalize physician assisted suicide. But that view does kind of imply an allusion to this goal of independence, or this belief in independence. And as a disability activist, I tend to fall on the more intersubjective Marxist side, and I tend to think that disabled people are coerced into physician-assisted suicide, wherein they could get they could get better access options. So I'm against physician-assisted suicide as an activist, but I do disagree with many disability rights propositions which decide to address the quality of life issues which are the center of the physician-assisted suicide debate through trying to instill better public health measures for disabled people. I think that we have seen kind of the health agenda, and especially disabled people in our movement have seen the health agenda kind of co-opted for profit. And so I would hope that an autonomous organization run by disability activists would be devoted to bettering the lives of disabled people instead of kind of a medical culture or a social services sector. And this is where I'm going to end the lecture, which is on a personal note. I got into disability studies while on Rashad Evans' debate team, and I was not the most successful debater, perhaps, but I am very skilled as a researcher. I did a lot of research for my fellow teammates. I believe in a pedagogical activism model of disability and debate. I have been trying to use when I was a debater. I tried to use in-round activism, and maybe was willing to lose debates in order to use that in-round activism to address ableism. I have tried to evangelize a disability activist debate. I run a group. It's called Students for an Accessible Debate Space. It's on Facebook. I've blogged about inaccessibility in debate to some degree. And I'm multiply disabled, and I'm a psychiatric survivor who is phobic and a stutterer and an autistic person. And I treat these identities as not coming from medicine, but experience of impairment and culture. But anyway, that was my long lecture on disability argumentation and specifically physician-assisted suicide. And I hope it was helpful to someone. And thank you.